It is nice to welcome you again as my guests. Thank you for your interest in this video. We share a great hobby, photography. And no matter what you shoot with, the main thing is that you shoot. Today's star of my video is the Tamron 2.8 28 to 105mm with Minolta, Konica A mount. This lens was calculated and manufactured before the age of digital cameras. I'm not quite sure anymore, but I think I saw this lens for the first time at Photokina in Cologne in 1998. The lens was supposed to cost 1,129 German marks at that time. This is, adjusted for inflation, 830 euros, which is a lot of money for that time. As far as I know, it was and still is the only 28 to 105mm zoom with a continuous f2.8. Personally, I would rather shoot with a modern 2.8 28 to 105mm than with the standard 2.8 24 to 70mm. A good combination for me would be a 15 to 35mm or 16 to 35mm, and the aforementioned 28 to 105mm. Unfortunately, this is still a dream. The lens was offered as an autofocus version for various camera mounts with a fixed bayonet. A version without autofocus was also available. Here Tamron used its legendary Adaptall II system. The technical specifications are without a doubt impressive. A weight of 845 grams, slightly different depending on the connection, with a length of 104.5mm, and a diameter of 87mm. 15 elements in 13 groups were installed. The lens accepts 82mm screw-in filters. Of course, I had planned to use this lens on my Sony A7III, and the Sony LA-EA4 are converted to Monster adapter. According to the Monster adapter website, this lens is not supported. Well, I thought the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and connected the lens with the adapter to the Sony A7III. An image appeared on the camera's monitor. The lens retracted to the infinity setting. Everything was fine, I thought. I pressed the shutter button to focus. But, alas, alas, alas. The autofocus tried to find its target, but in vain. Okay, the Monster website was right. I turned the camera off and on again, and had no success. Then I removed the adapter from the camera and lens, reassembled everything and tried again to get the autofocus to work correctly. It didn't help. Removing and then inserting the camera battery also brought no success. This combination does not work with the Monster adapter. I used the latest firmware version 6. I was a little skeptical after the autofocus didn't work on my Sony. Maybe something was wrong with the lens. Eyes closed and through, connected to the Minolta 9's eye, turned on the camera and... perfect! The autofocus works as expected, even relatively fast. Always remember, I am not a sports photographer. What is fast for me may be lame for one of you. Fortunately, I still have an unconverted Sony LA-EA4 adapter. I was sure, after the successful autofocus test on my analog Minolta camera, that the autofocus would work on this Sony adapter and my Sony A7III. And yes, it did. With such heavy lenses, it is good that the Sony adapter has its own tripod mount, which takes a lot of the load off the camera bayonet. Of course, and certainly you are interested in the image quality of this lens, which has a very interesting focal length range and speed. To say it in advance, the Tamron designers wanted too much of everything. Too high speed. Too large focal length range. Internal focusing. Non-rotating front lens. Short focusing distance from 44 to 50 centimeters, depending on the focal length. Unfortunately, this combined made for poor quality, at all focal lengths at f2.8 to 4. The lens has clearly visible barrel distortion at 28 and 35 millimeters. Between 50 and 70 meters, hardly any distortion is noticeable. At 85 to 105 millimeters the distortion becomes pincushion. The lens for me is a Tamron SP 5.6, 28 to 105 millimeter, which I still like to stop down to f8 or f11, and still not get really convincing sharpness. There are simply too many aberrations. Too bad, because I like the focal length range very much. Here you can see an example of a shot taken at 28mm and aperture 5.6. The corners of the image are still soft and low in contrast. The image center is okay, but not exhilarating. In my opinion, the lens achieves good values in the center of the image at 50mm and aperture 5.6, but a significantly weaker quality at the edges of the image. At 105mm focal length and f5.6, I think the lens is quite good overall, but nothing to rave about. Here I show you again the same motif of the fire station. Again taken with 105mm focal length. This time I used the aperture 11. From my experience, if your subject needs the best edge-to-edge sharpness, choose f8 or f11 exclusively. Depending on the subject, you can of course use a slightly larger aperture if, for example, your main subject is in the center of the frame or close to it, and you want to work with selective sharpness. Here you can see a macro series. I photographed the subject at 105mm and a distance of about 50 centimeters. You can see the quality of the unprocessed images from f2.8 to f16. When stopped down, the lens delivers a quality that I would describe like this. Better a picture with the Tamron 2.8 28 to 105mm at f8, than no picture at all. Finally, As always, a few processed images taken with this lens. Decide for yourself if the quality shown is enough for you. If you know the weaknesses of your lens, you also know its strengths. Thank you for your time. If you liked the video, please leave me a like. With pleasure, I welcome you also on my homepage, aperture1.4, and on Instagram, at aperture1.four.